Hello. So we're going to carry on with the rest of the chapter. We left off where Arthur had a great idea to turn Flat Stanley round again, but we don't know yet what that idea is, so we're going to find out. He jumped up and turned on the light and ran to the big storage box where toys and things were kept. He began to rummage in the box. Stanley sat up in bed to watch. Arthur flung aside a football and some lead soldiers and aeroplane models and lots of wooden blocks, and then he said, "Aha!" He had found what he wanted, an old bicycle pump. He held it up, and Stanley and he looked at each other. "Okay," Stanley said at last, "but take it easy." He put the end of the long pump hose in his mouth and clamped his lips tightly about it so that no air could escape. "I'll go slowly," Arthur said. "If it hurts or anything, wiggle your hand at me." He began to pump. And there's a picture of Arthur putting the pump in Stanley's mouth. At first, nothing happened except that Stanley's cheeks bulged a bit. Arthur watched his hand, but there was no wiggle signal, so he pumped on. Then suddenly, Stanley's top half began to swell. It's working, shouted Arthur, pumping away. Stanley spread his arms so that the air could get around inside him more easily. He got bigger and bigger. The buttons of his pyjamas top burst off. Pop, pop, pop. A moment more and he was all rounded out, head and body, arms and legs, but not his right foot. That foot stayed flat. Arthur stopped pumping. "It's like trying to do the very last bit of those long balloons," he said. "Maybe a shake would help." Stanley took his right foot and shook it twice, and with a little whooshing sound it swelled out to match the left one. And there stood Stanley Lambchop, as he used to be, as if he had never been flat at all. "Thank you, Arthur," Stanley said. "Thank you very much." The brothers were shaking hands when Mr. Lambchop strode into the room with Mrs. Lambchop right behind him. "We heard you," said Mr. Lambchop. "Up and talking when you ought to be asleep, eh? Shame on—" "George," said Mrs. Lambchop, "Stanley's round again." "You're right," said Mr. Lambchop, noticing. "Good for you, Stanley." "I'm the one who did it," Arthur said. "I blew him up." Everyone was terribly excited and happy, of course. Mrs. Lambchop made hot chocolate to celebrate the occasion, and several toasts were drunk to Arthur for his cleverness. When the little party was over, Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop tucked the boys back into their beds and kissed them, and then they turned out the light. "Good night," they said. "Good night," said Stanley and Arthur. It had been a long and tiring day. Very soon, all the Lambchops were asleep. And there's a picture of the Lambchops having their hot chocolate. And that is the end of our Flat Stanley story. Hope you enjoyed it.